You wake in the dark, not the gentle darkness of night, the kind that cradles you in its temporary embrace, promising dawn and renewal. No, this is the pressed-in darkness of a troopship's hab deck, where 400 souls breathe the same recycled air in a space designed for half that number. The darkness here has weight. It presses against your closed eyelids. It fills your lungs with every breath. It's a darkness made of human desperation, compressed into the iron belly of a ship that crawls through the void toward some distant war you've never been told about. The smell hits you before consciousness fully returns. You've been breathing it all night, but sleep had granted you mercy. Your mind had filtered it out, relegated it to background noise. Now awake, it demands acknowledgement. Unwashed bodies, certainly. 300 guardsmen packed into tiered bunks that creak with every movement, their personal hygiene reduced to whatever can be accomplished with a damp rag and rationed water. There's the bitter, burnt chemical tang of cheap recaf brewing somewhere in the darkness. The acrid bite of promethium lubricant that permeates everything on an Imperial vessel. And beneath it all, something else. Something metallic. Something organic and wrong in a way your hindbrain recognizes before your conscious mind can name it. You are Private Jerem Kask, 28 years old though you feel decades older, 3 years in the Imperial Guard. You were Valhalla Ice Warriors once, proud regiment, ancient lineage, traditions stretching back millennia. Were, past tense. Your original regiment was consolidated after the Hakkara campaign. That's the official term. Consolidated, as if hundreds of dead soldiers could be folded into a neat administrative category, their sacrifice rendered down to a line item in a Militarum ledger. You and 47 others were reassigned to the 117th Cadian Reborn. Not Cadian, Reborn, because the original 117th died to the last man on Cadia when it fell. These replacements simply inherited a proud name and the impossible burden of living up to ghosts. The lights come on with brutal suddenness, not gradually, not with warning. One moment, darkness. The next, harsh white luminescence that stabs through your eyelids and into your brain. Around you, 300 men and women groan, curse, shield their eyes. The morning has begun. The morning begins the same way every day on this ship, with light that feels like punishment. You swing your legs off the bunk, third tier, middle section, position 247, and your boots find the deck. The metal is cold even through the worn soles. Everything on this ship is cold. The heating systems are calibrated for survival, not comfort. Comfort is not an Imperial virtue. Around you, the hab deck transforms into controlled chaos. Guardsmen pull on uniforms that never quite dried from yesterday's wear. They check lasguns and bayonets with mechanical precision, movements perfected through repetition until they're indistinguishable from prayer. Some whisper the litany of the lasgun as they work, old words worn smooth by centuries of repetition. The lasgun is my life, the Emperor is my strength, in his name I shall not falter. Others work in silence, faces drawn and haunted. You notice something. It takes a moment to understand what you're seeing, but once you recognize it, you can't unsee it. Everyone is moving carefully, precisely, not with the sluggishness of sleep still clinging to their limbs, but with calculated deliberation. They're checking themselves, flexing fingers, rolling shoulders, testing joints and muscles with the focused attention of people preparing for an athletic event or an examination. The call comes over the voxcasters mounted in the ceiling, a voice rendered flat and emotionless by poor transmission. All personnel, morning inspection in 10 minutes. Compliance is mandatory. The Emperor protects. Your stomach clenches. Your heart rate increases. You can feel it, a quickening rhythm in your chest that you're suddenly, acutely aware of. Around you, the careful movements intensify. A guardsman near your bunk. You don't know his name, you've been on this ship for 6 weeks and you've learned not to learn names. Opens and closes his left hand repeatedly, watching his fingers with the intensity of a man studying sacred scripture. You join the formation in the corridor outside the hab deck. 300 guardsmen in neat ranks, standing at attention. The corridor is barely wide enough for 5 across, so the formation stretches back into the distance, disappearing around corners and through bulkhead doors. You can hear other units assembling on other decks, the sound of thousands of boots, thousands of bodies breathing in unison, transmitted through the ship's superstructure like a slow heartbeat. You're standing in the third rank, position 4. The man to your left is new, transferred in 2 weeks ago. The woman to your right is Corporal Dinah Marsk, 7 years in the Guard, veteran of campaigns whose names you've never heard spoken above a whisper. She stands with the perfect stillness of someone who's survived long enough to know that stillness is its own form of armor. And then he appears, Commissar Varrus. You've seen commissars before. On the propaganda reels, they're theatrical figures, black longcoats billowing dramatically, bolt pistols raised high, delivering stirring speeches about duty and sacrifice while La's fire streaks through the air behind them. They shout. They inspire. They're supposed to be living embodiments of the Emperor's will, terrible and magnificent in equal measure. Varrus doesn't shout. Varrus doesn't inspire. He's worse. He moves down the line with the measured precision of a chronometer's hand, each step identical to the last. He carries a data slate in one hand and an actual chronometer in the other, a beautifully crafted device, brass and crystal, older than you by decades. Centuries, perhaps. You can hear it ticking as he approaches your section. Tick, tick, tick. Each second measured, each second counted, each second somehow weaponized. Behind him, 2 medici servitors follow, their augmetic limbs clicking and whirring with each movement. They carry a case between them. You can't see what's inside, but you can guess. You've been through this ritual 14 times now. 14 mornings, 14 inspections, 14 times you've watched men die. Varrus stops before the first rank. He doesn't speak, doesn't offer greeting or acknowledgement. He simply raises one hand and the servitors move forward, opening their case with mechanical efficiency. Left arm, Varrus says. His voice is quiet, almost gentle. That somehow makes it worse. Forearm exposed. The guardsmen in the first rank comply. Sleeves are rolled back with shaking hands. Some hands shake more than others. You watch a young guardsman, can't be more than 19, struggle with his sleeve, his fingers refusing to cooperate. No one helps him. No one dares move. One of the servitors extends an arm. Mounted at the end is a blade, servo-assisted, sterile, impossibly sharp. Medical-grade steel that catches the harsh corridor lights and throws back glints of white brightness. The servitor's augmetic hand steadies the first guardsman's arm with gentle, implacable pressure. Bleeding compliance assessment, Varrus says, consulting his data slate. Standard incision, 3 inches below the left elbow. Depth, 4 millimeters. Location consistent across all subjects. Timing begins at first visible blood pooling. The blade descends, it's precise, efficient. The cut is made in less than a second. A clean line exactly 3 inches long on the guardsman's forearm. You can see it from where you stand. Skin parting, pink flesh revealed, the instant of delay before. Blood wells, dark red against pale skin. It pools in the wound, then begins to run down the guardsman's arm in thin rivulets. Varrus raises his chronometer, begins counting, silent, watching. The guardsman stares at his own arm with an expression you recognize. It's not pain. The cut is shallow enough that pain is secondary. It's terror, pure, crystallized terror. He's watching his own blood flow and wondering if it's flowing fast enough. 12.8 seconds to visible pooling, Varrus announces. He makes a notation on his data slate. Within acceptable parameters. Next. The guardsman exhales, a sound of pure relief that borders on a sob. He applies the gauze pad offered by the servitor, wrapping his arm with shaking hands. He's passed, for today. He gets to live for today. The servitor moves to the next guardsman. The blade descends again. Blood wells, Varrus counts. 11.4 seconds, acceptable. Again, 13.2 seconds, acceptable. Your counting positions. You're in the third rank. That means you try to calculate, but your mind is fuzzy, thoughts slipping through your mental fingers like water. Math becomes impossible when fear is the only thing your brain wants to process. 18.3 seconds. The words hang in the air. Different, wrong, too many seconds. You can see the Guardsman 4 positions down from your place in the formation. His name rises from memory before you can stop it, Petter Helm. You've known Helm for 2 years. He was Valhalla like you, one of the 47 who transferred. He survived 3 campaigns. He's quiet, dependable, the kind of soldier who does his duty without complaint or distinction. You played cards with him last night in the Hab deck. He won 6 throne gelt off you with a straight flush, and he'd smiled, actually smiled, when he collected his winnings. He's standing now with his arm extended, blood running down to his wrist and dripping from his fingers to the deck. His face has gone pale. His eyes are wide, fixed on Commissar Varrus with the frozen intensity of prey watching a predator close in. Regulation threshold is 15 seconds, Varrus says, his voice unchanged. Still quiet, still gentle, still terrible. 18.3 seconds to visible pooling indicates insufficient cardiovascular function, compromised circulation, physiological weakness. Sir, Helm begins, but his voice cracks, fails. What can he say? His blood has spoken for him. His body has testified against him. Varrus holsters the chronometer, draws his bolt pistol. The bolter is a massive weapon designed for space marines, modified for human use but still oversized in Varrus's hand. It's a weapon meant to crack power armor, to shatter ceramite and destroy enhanced physiologies that laugh at conventional ammunition. Against human flesh, against a simple human body standing at attention in a corridor. The Emperor's resources must not be squandered on insufficient vessels, Varrus says. It sounds rehearsed, ritual. These are words he's spoken before, words he'll speak again. Sir, please, Helm manages. His voice is stronger now, edged with desperation. I can improve. I'll train harder, I'll. The bolt round interrupts him. One shot, center mass. The explosive projectile enters Helm's chest and detonates inside his torso. You've seen what bolt rounds do on the battlefield, but there's something different about seeing it here, in a corridor at point-blank range, to a man standing at attention. Helm doesn't fly backward dramatically like in the propaganda reels. He just comes apart. His chest cavity opens outward in a spray of bone and tissue and blood that spatters the guardsman standing near him. His body drops, no longer recognizable as human, just meat and uniform in a heap on the deck. The servitors are already moving before the echo of the shot fades. They grab Helm's corpse, what remains of it, and drag it toward a disposal chute built into the corridor wall. They move with mechanical efficiency, leaving a smeared trail of blood on the deck. The body disappears into the chute. A moment later, you hear the distant sound of furnaces roaring somewhere deep in the ship's bowels. The inspection continues. Varrus moves to the next guardsman in line. The servitor with the blade follows. A fresh cut is made. Blood wells. The chronometer begins its count. 14.9 seconds. Acceptable. You realize you're shaking. Your entire body is trembling, muscles twitching with suppressed adrenaline and terror. You force yourself still. Stillness is armor, stillness is survival. The inspection moves through the first rank, then the second, each cut, each measurement, each judgment rendered in quiet tones and recorded on a data slate. Most pass, most bleed fast enough, but not all. In the second rank, a woman fails at 17.1 seconds. The bolt round is just as efficient, just as final. The servitors drag her away, the furnaces consume her. Then Varrus reaches your rank. He's 3 positions away. 2, 1. The woman to your right, Corporal Marsk, extends her arm. You see something you don't expect. Her hand is perfectly steady. No trembling, no fear evident in her posture. The servitor makes the cut. Blood wells immediately, flowing fast and bright. You wonder if that's natural or if she's done something, taken something to ensure rapid bleeding. 11.8 seconds. Acceptable. Marsk applies her gauze with the same steady hands, her face a mask of neutral calm. Then the servitor's attention turns to you. You extend your left arm, rolling back your sleeve with fingers that feel distant and clumsy, as if they belong to someone else. The servitor's augmetic hand grips your forearm, gentle pressure, implacable force. You can feel the warmth of your own skin contrasted against the cold metal of its fingers. The blade descends. There's a moment of bright, sharp pain, surprisingly clean, surprisingly specific. Then the pain fades into the background, overwhelmed by something more fundamental. You're watching your own blood well in the wound, and you're praying to the Emperor, to whatever powers might listen, that it flows fast enough. You can see it pooling, dark red, gathering in the cut, beginning to overflow. Varrus raises his chronometer, begins his count. Time dilates, stretches. Each second becomes a subjective eternity. You can hear your heartbeat in your ears, a rapid thunder that seems disconnected from the measured ticking of the chronometer. You can feel blood pulsing through the veins in your arm, can sense the biological machinery of your cardiovascular system working, and you wonder with desperate intensity if it's working fast enough, if your heart is beating strong enough, if your blood is flowing. 13.4 seconds, acceptable. The relief is physical. Your legs nearly buckle. Your vision, which you hadn't realized had narrowed to a tunnel focused solely on the cut and the blood, expands back to normalcy. The servitor offers gauze, and you take it with shaking hands, wrapping your forearm tight enough to make your fingers tingle. The inspection continues down your rank and the ranks behind you. You hear the measurements called out in Varrus's unchanging voice. Most acceptable, some not. Each failure punctuated by the bolt pistol's roar and the servitor's mechanical efficiency. By the time Varrus reaches the end of the formation, 8 guardsmen are dead, 8 bodies consumed by the ship's furnaces, 8 empty bunks that will remain empty for perhaps a day before new transfers arrive to fill them, their names recorded in the regiment's roster as if they'd always been there, as if the men and women they replaced had never existed at all. Dismissed, Varrus says. Morning meal is at 0700 hours. Equipment inspection at 0900. The Emperor protects those who prove themselves worthy. The formation breaks. 300 guardsmen, -8, shuffle toward the mess hall in near silence. You move with them, your left arm throbbing beneath the gauze, your mind struggling to process what you've just witnessed. You knew Helm. You played cards with him last night. He won 6 throne gelt. He was smiling. 18.3 seconds. 3.3 seconds too slow. 3 seconds that determined his blood wasn't flowing at regulation speed, and therefore he was deemed insufficient, unsuitable, a waste of Imperial resources, heretical in his very biology. As you walk, you become aware of the conversations happening around you, whispered exchanges, voices kept low to avoid drawing attention. The guardsmen are checking their arms, pressing the fresh cuts, watching the blood seep through gauze. They're discussing timing, comparing their numbers in hushed tones. 14.9, 11.8, 12.2, numbers that determine life and death rendered down to decimal points. You pass a viewing port, one of the rare windows that breaks the monotony of the corridor. Through the armored glass you can see the void beyond, black space, distant stars rendered as cold white points against infinite darkness. Somewhere out there is Terra, the homeworld of humanity, the seat of the Imperium. The golden throne where the Emperor sits in perpetual agony, sustaining the astronomicon that makes travel through this void possible. The propaganda tells you he sacrifices for humanity, that his suffering is noble, that everything done in his name is justified by the magnitude of his sacrifice. But looking at that distant void, feeling the ache in your freshly cut arm, remembering the sound of Helm's body disappearing into the furnace chute, you can't help but wonder, in the grim darkness of the far future, your blood must flow at regulation speed, or you are deemed insufficient, unsuitable, heretical in your very biology. How did it come to this? And more importantly, what happens when your body, stressed and terrified and pushed beyond all limits, begins to fail this test? What happens when it's not 18.3 seconds, but 18.4? What happens when your body, ground down by war and fear and malnutrition, can no longer meet the arbitrary standards of a machine that values obedience over biology? The questions follow you to the mess hall. They sit with you as you choke down gray protein paste and weak recaf. They haunt you as you return to the habdeck and sit on your bunk, staring at the ceiling, unable to shake the image of Helm's face in that last moment before the bolt round ended his existence. You realize something that turns your blood cold. You've been in this regiment for 6 weeks, 14 morning inspections. You've watched 37 men and women die for bleeding too slowly, 37 executions, 37 people whose crime was insufficient blood flow, 37 bodies fed to the furnaces because their biology didn't meet regulation standards. And every morning, you wake up knowing you might be next. Every morning, you extend your arm and pray that this time, this one time, your blood flows fast enough. Every morning, you watch the chronometer count seconds that determine whether you live or die. This is life in the Imperial Guard. This is service to the Emperor. This is what it means to be human in a galaxy that considers humanity infinitely expendable, infinitely replaceable, infinitely subject to measurements and assessments and judgments that reduce existence itself to a matter of seconds. 18.3 seconds, too slow. 13.4 seconds, acceptable. The difference between life and death measured with chronometric precision. And tomorrow morning it all begins again. You need to understand how it came to this. Not because understanding will save you. Not because knowing the history will somehow exempt you from the morning blade and the ticking chronometer, but because the human mind demands narrative. It demands causality. When confronted with horror that seems arbitrary, with cruelty that appears random, we instinctively search for the logic behind it. We tell ourselves that if we can understand the system, we can perhaps survive it. This is a comforting lie, but lies in the Imperium are sometimes the only comfort available. So let's trace the genealogy of your potential death. Let's examine how a doctrine of murder became protocol, how arbitrary cruelty became policy, how one zealot's insanity metastasized across 3 entire subsectors to infect thousands of regiments with a practice that turns biology itself into a crime. First, understand this. What you experienced this morning is not universal. The Imperial Guard is vast beyond comprehension. Billions upon billions of soldiers scattered across a million worlds, fighting wars most will never hear about, dying in conflicts that last years or decades or centuries. The Department of Militarum, the vast bureaucratic organism that feeds and equips and directs this endless tide of humanity toward war, operates with inconsistency born of impossible scale. Some regiments receive the best equipment the Imperium can manufacture. Others fight with weapons that would have been considered obsolete in the age of strife. Some regiments are led by officers who genuinely care about the men and women under their command. Others are commanded by sociopaths and sadists who view their soldiers as expendable ammunition. The bleeding compliance assessment is specific, localized. It exists in certain Militarum oversight zones where particularly zealous Commissariat officers have implemented it, and where the vast machinery of imperial bureaucracy hasn't yet ground slowly enough to review, assess, and potentially countermand it. The Imperium moves slowly. Reform moves even slower. And in that gap between practice and policy review, thousands die. The practice originates from a single document, Treatise on Physiological Combat Readiness, authored by Lord Commissar Octavio Gelman in the year 987 of the 41st millennium, about 40 standard years ago by the imperial calendar, though dating across the Imperium is complicated by relativistic travel and the vagaries of the warp. Gelman was, by all accounts, a brilliant man. He'd served for 60 years. He'd overseen 17 regimental campaigns. His combat record was impeccable. His regiments consistently showed low desertion rates, high combat effectiveness, excellent discipline. He was decorated, honored, his name spoken with respect in Commissariat academies. He was also, it should be noted, completely insane. His treatise begins reasonably enough. He argues that physical fitness is inadequately assessed in Imperial Guard recruitment and ongoing service evaluations. He presents data showing correlation between cardiovascular health and combat performance. He suggests that more rigorous medical screening could improve unit effectiveness. These are sensible observations. the sort of recommendations that might lead to better training regimens or nutritional standards. Then, on page 47 of the treatise, Gelman makes a logical leap that can only be described as pathological. He argues that blood coagulation rates, how quickly blood flows from a standardized wound, can serve as a proxy measurement for overall physical conditioning. His reasoning: slow bleeding indicates poor circulation, which indicates weak cardiovascular function, which indicates overall physical weakness, which indicates a soldier is a liability in combat, which means continued investment in such a soldier is a waste of Imperial resources. The logic is seductive in its simplicity. Blood flow can be measured objectively. A timed test provides clear, numerical results that remove subjective judgment from the equation. 15 seconds becomes the threshold, chosen not through medical research, but because it's the median bleeding time in Gelman's initial sample of 300 soldiers he tested. Half bled faster, half bled slower. The ones who bled slower, Gelman argued, should be removed from service. The treatise continues for another 200 pages, constructing an elaborate theoretical framework that dresses pseudoscientific nonsense in the language of Imperial doctrine. Gelman quotes extensively from the Tactica Imperium. He invokes the Emperor's wisdom. He presents graphs and charts that look authoritative and meaningful. He builds a monument to his own madness and calls it optimization. The truly horrifying part: the Commissariat High Command read his treatise. They found it compelling. You have to understand the context. The Imperium in the late 41st millennium is besieged on all fronts. The Great Rift has torn the galaxy in half. Chaos incursions are increasing. Xeno's threats multiply. The demand for soldiers far outstrips supply, even with populations measured in the quadrillions. The Militarum is desperately seeking ways to maximize combat effectiveness with minimum resource expenditure. Gelman's treatise offered something appealing: a simple, objective test that promised to identify weak soldiers before combat revealed them. A way to eliminate inefficiency. A methodology for ensuring only the strongest served. The Commissariat approved his methodology for experimental implementation in the Tempestus subsector. 3 regiments were selected for initial trials. Morning bleeding assessments were implemented. Soldiers who failed the 15-second threshold were executed for physiological insufficiency. The results, according to official Commissariat reports, were remarkable. 0 instances of retreat or cowardice, perfect compliance with orders, improved unit cohesion. Combat efficiency ratings increased by an average of 12%. These statistics are both accurate and completely misleading. 0 retreat because soldiers who might retreat are executed before combat for biological variants. Perfect compliance because terror is an excellent motivator. Unit cohesion improves because survivors bond over shared trauma. And combat efficiency. That number increased because efficiency is measured as a ratio of objectives achieved to resources expended, and dead soldiers reduce the denominator. But the Commissariat saw only the numbers. Saw only the promise of a doctrine that could be scaled across the Imperium. Saw a methodology for ensuring loyalty and effectiveness through simple physiological assessment. The doctrine spread, not officially at first, not through formal Militarum channels that might have triggered review by the Administratum's medical divisions. No, it spread through the Commissariat's internal networks, ambitious officers sharing Gelman's treatise, seeking to demonstrate their own zeal and commitment to Imperial efficiency. If bleeding compliance works in the Tempestus subsector, surely it can work here. Surely implementing such rigorous standards demonstrates my dedication to purging weakness from the Emperor's armies. Within 10 years, variations of the bleeding compliance assessment had been implemented in portions of 3 subsectors. Some tested weekly, some daily, some only before major engagements. The specific implementation varied, but the core concept remained. Your blood must flow fast enough or you die. Now, if you're thinking rationally about this, which, admittedly, becomes difficult when you're living inside the nightmare, you might ask, didn't anyone object? Didn't any medical officers point out the obvious flaws in using bleeding rates as fitness assessments? Didn't anyone present evidence that the doctrine was counterproductive? Yes, they did. Let me tell you about Medici Orderly Helena Varrus. Varrus served with the 83rd Valhallan Regiment, not your original unit but Valhallan nonetheless, part of the same military culture. She was a career medic, 23 years of service, assigned to a regiment that had recently adopted bleeding compliance assessments under a new commissar who'd read Gelman's treatise and found it inspiring. Varrus began documenting the executions. Not openly, that would have been suicidal, but she kept records. She noted environmental conditions. She tracked which soldiers failed and under what circumstances. Over 6 months, she compiled data on 214 executions for bleeding insufficiency. Her findings were damning. Bleeding rates, she discovered, vary dramatically based on factors that have nothing to do with overall fitness. Temperature, cold environments slow blood flow. Warm environments accelerate it. The variation can be as much as 30% between extremes. Most Guard regiments serve in environments with temperature fluctuations ranging from sub-zero to scorching, meaning the same soldier might pass inspection one day and fail the next based purely on ambient temperature. Hydration status. Dehydrated blood is thicker, flows slower. Overhydration thins blood, accelerates flow. Imperial Guard standard rations provide marginal hydration at best. Water rationing is common, meaning most Guardsmen are chronically dehydrated, meaning their blood flows slower than it would under optimal conditions. Stress and anxiety. Extreme stress causes vasoconstriction. Blood vessels constrict, reducing flow to extremities. Every Guardsman standing in that inspection line is terrified. Their bodies are physiologically responding to fear by reducing blood flow to their limbs. The terror of the test actively makes passing it more difficult. Altitude and atmospheric pressure. Thinner atmospheres mean lower oxygen content, means blood doesn't oxygenate as efficiently, means slower capillary circulation. Many worlds have atmospheric pressure significantly different from Terra standard. This affects bleeding rates in ways that have nothing to do with fitness. Nutritional status. Malnutrition affects blood composition, clotting factors, vascular health. Imperial Guard standard rations provide minimum caloric intake, minimal nutritional variety. Most Guardsmen are, by definition, malnourished by civilian standards. This affects their bleeding rates. Recent physical activity. Exercise increases heart rate and blood pressure, accelerating blood flow. Rest decreases both. Soldiers who have just completed physical training bleed faster than soldiers at rest. But this doesn't indicate superior fitness, merely different physiological state. Age, gender, genetics. Natural biological variation means different humans have different baseline bleeding rates that have nothing to do with combat effectiveness. A 40-year-old soldier may have naturally slower bleeding than a 20-year-old purely due to aging vasculature. Female soldiers may have different bleeding rates due to hormonal variations. Genetic factors influence coagulation chemistry. Varrus's conclusion, documented in a report she submitted through official medical channels. 68% of executions for bleeding insufficiency were physiologically normal individuals whose bleeding rates fell outside the arbitrary 15-second threshold due to environmental factors, stress response, or natural biological variation that bore no relationship to combat effectiveness. In other words, more than 2/3 of the executions were murdering healthy, capable soldiers for failing a test that measured luck, not fitness. Varrus submitted her report. It was reviewed by her commanding Medici officer, who found her methodology sound and her conclusions compelling. It was forwarded up the chain of command. It reached the regimental command staff. It was read by officers who understood the implications and recognized the waste. It was then forwarded to Commissar Varrus, the officer who'd implemented bleeding compliance in the regiment. Varrus read the report. He thanked Varrus for her diligence. He commended her scientific rigor. Then he executed her for questioning Commissariat policy. The report was classified as heretical literature and destroyed. The commanding medici officer who'd endorsed it was reassigned to a penal legion. The regimental officers who'd forwarded it up the chain were noted as potential ideological liabilities in their permanent records, and the bleeding compliance assessments continued. Varrus's story is not unique. Across the regiments where this doctrine has been implemented, medical officers have compiled similar evidence, similar reports, similar damning conclusions about the policy's ineffectiveness and counterproductive nature. The reports are ignored, suppressed, or result in the report author's deaths. Because here's what you need to understand. The cruelty is not accidental. The inefficiency is not a bug in the system. The system is working exactly as intended. But we'll get to that revelation later. For now, understand only this. The doctrine exists. It spreads. And the machine that could review and correct it moves so slowly that by the time it might render judgment, thousands more will have died. Now let's talk about what the doctrine does to the soldiers living under it. There's a phenomenon the regimental medici officers have named, in whispered conversations where commissars can't overhear, anticipatory execution anxiety. It manifests in predictable stages. Stage 1. Hypervigilance. Soldiers become obsessively aware of their bodies. They check their pulse constantly. They examine their arms for any sign of circulatory insufficiency. They time their own bleeding from minor cuts sustained during training or maintenance work. They become amateur physiologists, desperately seeking to understand the biological processes that might kill them. Stage 2. Superstitious preparation. In the absence of actual medical guidance, because medical officers are forbidden from advising on how to pass bleeding compliance tests, soldiers develop folk remedies and preparatory rituals. They exercise their arms before inspections, trying to increase blood flow. They pinch themselves to stimulate circulation. Some develop elaborate prayer rituals, invoking the emperor not for courage in combat but for faster flowing blood. Others turn to dietary manipulation, consuming foods they believe thin blood or improve circulation, operating on superstition rather than medical science. Stage 3. Pharmaceutical intervention. A black market inevitably develops. Where there's desperate demand, supply emerges. Unscrupulous quartermasters and opportunistic criminals sell substances claimed to ensure rapid bleeding. Coagulation suppressants stolen from medici supplies. Industrial chemicals that thin blood at the cost of internal hemorrhaging, stimulants that increase heart rate and blood pressure to dangerous levels. The market is lucrative. The products are often as deadly as failing the test itself, just slower. Stage 4. Self-harm protocols. This is where the psychological degradation becomes undeniable. Soldiers begin self-harming before inspections, not obviously, not enough to draw attention, but enough to prime their cardiovascular systems. They pierce their fingertips with styluses. They create small cuts in hidden locations to get blood flowing before the official blade descends. They develop techniques to warm their arms, to stimulate blood flow, to trick their bodies into passing a test that their bodies are physiologically designed to fail under stress conditions. Stage 5. Suicidal ideation and dissociation. The final stage. Soldiers begin actively seeking combat wounds, not for glory, not for medals, but because at least in combat, nobody times your bleeding. A shrapnel wound acquired fighting orcs doesn't come with a chronometer and a data slate. It's almost preferable. Better to be torn apart by enemy fire than executed for bleeding 0.7 seconds too slowly. Some soldiers report feeling disconnected from their own bodies, no longer inhabiting their flesh, but merely observing it from a distance, waiting for the inevitable moment when it betrays them. These stages are predictable, documented. They occur with statistical regularity across every regiment where bleeding compliance is implemented, and the Commissariat knows this. The medical data exists. The psychological profiles are recorded in classified files. The evidence of systemic psychological destruction is undeniable. The assessments continue anyway, because efficiency is not the point. Optimization is not the goal. The point is something far darker. Something we'll examine in excruciating detail as this documentation continues. But for now, as you sit in the mess hall with your arm throbbing beneath its gauze, as you watch 300 guardsmen eat their rations in near silence, as you see every single one of them periodically checking their arms, pressing the fresh wounds, watching their blood seep through bandages, for now, understand only this. The doctrine exists, it spreads, it destroys, and tomorrow morning you'll wake in the dark again, you'll stand in formation again, you'll extend your arm again, the blade will descend again, the chronometer will count again, and you'll pray to the Emperor, to whatever powers might care about something as insignificant as one human life in a galaxy of quadrillions, that this one time, your blood flows at regulation speed, 13.4 seconds. Acceptable, but what about tomorrow? What about next week, when the ship transitions through the warp and everyone's biology goes slightly wrong from the cosmic radiation? What about when you're deployed to a cold world and temperature drops your bleeding rate by 15%? What about when malnutrition finally catches up with you, when your blood composition changes, when your body, ground down by war and fear and the slow biological decay of life in the Imperial Guard, can no longer meet arbitrary standards? What then? The doctrine has an answer, a bolt round, a furnace, a data slate notation that records your existence as a statistic in a report that nobody will read. The Emperor's resources must not be squandered on insufficient vessels. Your body is a vessel. Your blood is being assessed. Your worthiness is measured in seconds, and the machine is patient. The machine is thorough. The machine will test you every day until, eventually, inevitably, you fail. This is what it means to serve in the Imperial Guard under the Doctrine of Optimized Lethality. This is what it means to be human in the 41st millennium, where even your biology can be heretical, where even the rhythm of your heartbeat can condemn you. Welcome to the Emperor's service. The Emperor protects. Does he? The mess hall is a cathedral of silence. 300 guardsmen sit at long metal tables bolted to the deck, consuming their morning rations with mechanical efficiency. Spoons scrape against trays. The sound echoes in the cavernous space, metallic and harsh. The ration today is gray protein paste derived from processed corpse starch, textured with what the Militarum claims is vitamin-enriched grain supplement, but tastes like compressed cardboard. There's a thin gruel that might once have been vegetables, rendered down to indistinguishable brown sludge. A piece of dark bread so dense it could serve as armor plating. Weak recaf in dented tin cups, bitter enough to make you wince. You've eaten worse. On Hakara, during the siege months, you went weeks on half rations and melted snow. This, by comparison, is adequate. Survival rations, calculated to provide minimal nutrition necessary to keep a human body functioning at combat-ready status, but nobody's appreciating the food, because there's an empty seat where Peter Helm should be sitting. Fourth table, second bench, position 3, his spot. You can see it from where you're sitting 6 tables away, angled view past the serving line. The space is conspicuous, obvious. The guardsmen on either side of the empty seat are eating with careful deliberation, eyes fixed on their trays, posture rigid. Nobody sits in Helm's spot. Nobody mentions him. Nobody asks what happened, even though everyone knows. Everyone was there. Everyone watched. This is how the Guard handles death, through systematic erasure. Helm will be removed from the roster by afternoon. His bunk will be reassigned. His equipment will be inventoried and redistributed. His personal effects, if he had any, which most guardsmen don't, will be cataloged and either shipped to next of kin, unlikely, or incinerated, probable. Within 48 hours, it will be as if Peter Helm never existed. The empty seat will be filled tomorrow when the next batch of transfers arrives. Some fresh-faced recruit or battle-weary veteran reassigned from another unit. They'll sit in Helm's spot, eat their rations, and have no idea that 3 days ago, a man sat there who played cards and smiled and bled 3 seconds too slowly. You force yourself to eat. The protein paste tastes like chalk and despair. You wash it down with recaf that's somehow both watery and too strong. the bitterness coating your tongue with chemical aftertaste. Around you, the silence continues, broken only by the sounds of eating and the occasional cough or shuffle of boots on deck plating. Then you notice, everyone is checking their arms, not obviously, not openly, but every few seconds you see it, a guardsman's hand drifting to their left forearm, pressing against the gauze, applying pressure to test the wound beneath. Some do it unconsciously, automatic gesture like scratching an itch. Others are more deliberate, watching their fingers as they press, looking for what? Blood seeping through the bandage. Proof that their circulation is still adequate. Reassurance that they're still bleeding at regulation speed. You realize you're doing it too. Your right hand has moved to your left forearm without conscious command, fingers pressing against the gauze, feeling the dull ache of the cut beneath. You pull your hand away, force it back to your spoon. Take another bite of protein paste that you don't taste. Across the table, you catch Corporal Dinah Marsk watching you. She's older than most, 34, ancient by guard standards where the average service life is measured in months, not years. 7 years in service, 17 campaigns. 3 failed bleeding tests that she somehow passed by fractions of seconds. You've spoken to her maybe a dozen times in 6 weeks, brief exchanges about duty rotations or equipment requisitions. She's not unfriendly, but she has the emotional distance of someone who's learned not to form attachments. She's pressing her own arm, testing her wound. Her expression is neutral, but you can see calculation behind her eyes. She's assessing, measuring, evaluating her own body like a piece of equipment that might malfunction. To your left sits Guardsman recruit Tomas Vey, 19 years old, fresh from his Hive World conscription. This is his first campaign. He arrived 4 weeks ago, all nervous energy and poorly suppressed terror. He hasn't learned to hide his emotions yet, hasn't developed the blank-faced stoicism that veterans wear like armor. He's not eating. His tray sits untouched in front of him, protein paste congealing into an even less appealing consistency. His hands are trembling. Every few seconds he glances at his left arm, then quickly looks away as if afraid that looking at the wound might somehow make it worse. "Eat," Marsk says quietly, not looking at Vey, eyes on her own tray. "You need the calories. Malnutrition slows circulation. Slow circulation means..." She doesn't finish the sentence. She doesn't need to. Vey picks up his spoon with shaking hands, takes a bite, swallows mechanically. Further down the table, you overhear a whispered conversation. "Heard it's the cold. The ship's environmental controls are set too low. Drops our core temperature by half a degree, slows everything down. No, it's the rations, not enough iron. Blood needs iron, without it coagulation. Both of you are wrong, it's stress. The body responds to fear by constricting blood vessels. We're literally failing the test because we're afraid of failing the test. So what do we do? Silence, because there's no good answer. There's no technique or trick or protocol that guarantees passing. There's only luck, biology, the random factors of temperature and hydration and the specific state of your cardiovascular system at the precise moment the blade descends. You finish your meal, stand, take your tray to the washing station. The servitors there accept it with mechanical efficiency, their augmetic limbs moving in precise patterns perfected through thousands of repetitions. They don't acknowledge you. Don't see you. You're just another piece of meat that needs feeding, another resource that requires maintenance. You have 2 hours before equipment inspection. Most guardsmen return to the hab deck for whatever passes for personal time in the guard, cleaning weapons, sleeping if nightmares permit, playing cards or dice for meager stakes. You should do the same. Your lasca needs cleaning. Your uniform needs mending. You should rest. Instead, you find yourself wandering the ship's service corridors. Every Imperial vessel is a warren of passages beyond the main decks, maintenance tunnels, service conduits, cargo routes used by menial workers and servitors. These passages aren't meant for military personnel, but they're not explicitly forbidden either. They're simply overlooked, beneath notice. In the narrow tunnels away from officers and commissars, a kind of shadow economy exists. You know where you're going. You've been here once before, 3 weeks ago, just to see if the rumors were true. The tunnel is narrow. You have to duck beneath low-hanging pipes, turn sideways to squeeze past ventilation housings. The air is different here. Hotter, more humid, thick with industrial smells and the ozone tang of electrical systems. Your boots clang on metal grating that's been worn smooth by years of foot traffic. You pass menial workers, hunched figures in ragged coveralls, maintaining systems nobody else thinks about. They don't look at you. In the Imperium's hierarchy, guard soldiers and ship menials occupy different castes. You might as well be invisible to each other. Then you reach a junction where 3 passages meet, and there's a man waiting. Pek Redline Ortham. Militarum quartermaster officially. Black marketeer realistically. He's maybe 50, though hard living makes imperial age difficult to guess. Scarred face, augmetic left eye that whirs faintly when it focuses, the kind of casual corruption that thrives in the Imperium's massive bureaucracy. He's sitting on a crate sorting through inventory on a battered data slate. He looks up when you approach. His augmetic eye focuses with an audible click. "Kask," he says, not friendly, not unfriendly. Purely transactional. "Thought you might come by today, bad morning." "Helm failed," you say. 18.3 seconds. Redline nods, makes a notation on his slate. "Yeah, heard about that. 3rd one this week. You passed though, right? Saw you in formation. You're still walking around." 13.4. That's cutting it close. He sets down his slate, leans back against the tunnel wall. "So, you here for the pitch or you here to buy?" You hesitate. This is the moment, the decision, the line you either cross or don't. "What do you have?" you ask. Redline's scarred face splits into something that might be a smile. "Same as always. 3 product lines depending on what you need and what you can afford." He reaches into the crate beside him, pulls out 3 small vials, sets them on the grating between you. Option 1, circulation stimulant. Medical grade, stolen from Medici supplies. Increases heart rate, dilates blood vessels, thins blood slightly. Guarantees rapid bleeding. Side effects: hand tremors, insomnia, heart palpitations, occasional psychosis with extended use. 10 thrown gelt per dose. He taps the second vial. Option 2, industrial anticoagulant. Normally used in plasma systems to prevent fluid crystallization. Repurposed for human consumption. More effective than the medical stuff, your blood will practically pour out. Side effects: internal hemorrhaging, gastric bleeding, potential organ failure. Also, it tastes like battery acid. 5 thrown gelt per dose. The third vial. Option 3, my special mix. Little bit of column A, little bit of column B, some other ingredients I don't disclose. Most effective option. Your blood will flow so fast they'll think you're augmented. Side effects: all of the above, plus maybe some new ones we haven't discovered yet. 15 thrown gelt per dose. He leans back, watching you with his augmetic eye. You pass today, Kask. You're still in the acceptable range, but for how long? You lose 2 seconds of bleeding speed. Maybe you get dehydrated. Maybe the ship drops into a cold zone. Maybe you're just having a bad day. And suddenly you're helm. Suddenly you're protein paste in the ship's nutrient recyclers. He's not wrong, you know he's not wrong. How many guardsmen are using your products? You ask. Redline shrugs. 60% of the regiment by my estimate, maybe more. Everyone's scared, Kask. Fear is good for business. The Commissariat knows about this. Probably, but here's the thing, I'm careful. I don't sell enough to anyone to cause obvious overdose symptoms. I spread my supply across the regiment. And at the end of the day, Varrus doesn't actually care what you put in your body as long as you bleed fast enough. The test doesn't measure your health. It measures your compliance. So if compliance requires pharmaceutical intervention. He spreads his hands. The Imperium has never been too concerned with how soldiers survive, only that they do. You look at the vials. Clear liquid in clinical containers. They look harmless. Medical. They're poison. Slow, cumulative poison that will destroy your cardiovascular system over months of use. But months is longer than tomorrow morning. I have 43 thrown gelt, you say quietly. That buys you 4 doses of the medical grade or 8 doses of the industrial, or 2 doses of my special blend with 3 thrown left over. 4 days, 8 days, 2 days. That's how you're measuring your life now in doses in temporarily purchased survival. If I take the medical grade, you say, how long before the side effects become problematic? Depends on your physiology. Some guardsmen can use it for months with minimal impact. Others develop cardiac arrhythmia after 2 weeks. You won't know until you try. The utilitarian calculus is clear. You can risk dying in tomorrow's inspection, or you can definitely poison yourself slowly and maybe survive a few weeks longer. These are your options. These are the choices available to a soldier serving the God Emperor of mankind in the 41st millennium. You're reaching for your thrown gelt when voices echo down the tunnel. Redline's entire demeanor changes instantly. The vials disappear into his crate. His data slate flickers to a genuine inventory screen. By the time the voices get closer, he looks like exactly what he officially is: a bored quartermaster reviewing supply requisitions in a quiet corner. You turn. 2 guardsmen from another squad are approaching. You recognize them from formations but don't know their names. They see you. See Redline. Don't acknowledge either of you. They walk past, conversation dying mid-sentence, resuming only when they're well beyond earshot. Everyone knows. Nobody speaks about it. The black market exists in a strange status, simultaneously open secret and carefully maintained fiction. As long as nobody forces official acknowledgement, the machine tolerates it. After they pass, Redline retrieves the vials. So, he says, we doing business or you just browsing? You count out 30 thrown gelt. Take 3 doses of the medical grade stimulant. The vials are cold in your palm, glass smooth and clinical. One more thing, you say. Do these actually work? Redline looks at you with his natural eye. The augmetic one is cold and mechanical, but his real eye shows something that might be sympathy, or pity, or simply the tired recognition of a man who's seen this transaction 1,000 times. They work, he says. They'll keep you bleeding fast. They'll keep you alive. For a while. He doesn't elaborate on what a while means. He doesn't have to. You pocket the vials, turn to leave. Kask, Redline calls after you. You stop. One more thing. The stimulants help with the test, but they don't help with the fear. Nothing helps with the fear. You learn to live with it, or it kills you before Varrus gets the chance. You leave him there in the tunnel, surrounded by his crates of contraband, profiting from terror. You don't judge him. In the Imperium, you survive by whatever means available. Ethics is a luxury reserved for people not living on borrowed time measured in seconds. The afternoon brings combat drills in the troopship's hangar bay, a vast space normally used for vehicle storage, repurposed into a training ground. 300 guardsmen run through combat scenarios, bayonet drills, firing range exercises, squad maneuver tactics. The drills are familiar, routine. You've done these same exercises hundreds of times, but something is different today. Everyone is fighting more aggressively. You notice it immediately. Guardsmen throwing themselves into melee drills with reckless intensity, movements sharp and violent where they should be controlled. In hand-to-hand combat training, blows that should be pulled are landing with full force. You watch 2 guardsmen grappling in a wrestling drill, and it's not training anymore. It's actual combat, both men straining with red-faced desperation. You're paired with Recruit Vey for bayonet practice. He's taller than you, longer reach, but completely untrained. Under normal circumstances, you walk him through proper technique, footwork, blade angles, how to use your body weight effectively. Instead, he comes at you like he's trying to actually kill you. His first thrust is wild, poorly controlled, dangerous. You deflect it, but barely. His second is faster, better, desperate. He's not thinking about technique or training. He's just attacking, all fear and aggression channeled into violent motion. You realize he's trying to prove something. To himself. To anyone watching. He's demonstrating physical fitness, combat capability. The kind of strength and vitality that surely correlates with fast bleeding blood, with cardiovascular health, with worthiness. It's pathetic, tragic, and you understand it completely because you're doing the same thing. Your counterthrust catches him in the shoulder, not hard enough to injure but solid contact. He staggers back. For a moment you think he'll call the match. Then his lips pull back in something that's not quite a smile. His eyes are fever bright. He comes at you again. The drill continues. You're both breathing hard, both moving with intensity that exceeds training requirements. Around you, every pair is the same. Guardsmen fighting like their lives depend on demonstrating physical prowess, because maybe, somehow, if they're strong enough, fit enough, aggressive enough, their bodies won't betray them with insufficient blood flow. Then Vey overextends. His boot catches on deck plating. He stumbles forward directly into your blade. The training bayonets are blunted, edges dulled to prevent accidental death. But blunt doesn't mean harmless. Your blade catches Vey in the shoulder, right side between collarbone and joint, and punches through his uniform. Blood, immediate, profuse, dark red spreading across gray fabric. Vey staggers back, hand going to his shoulder. He pulls his hand away. It's covered in blood. He stares at it, expression unreadable. The drill stops. Guardsmen are gathering, not to help, not immediately. First they watch. They watch the blood flow. It's pouring from Vey's shoulder, running down his arm, dripping from his fingers to the deck. Fast, unquestionably fast. No one needs a chronometer to know this bleeding would pass any assessment with seconds to spare. Someone laughs. Nervous sound, but genuine relief behind it. Someone else. That's good flow, Vey, real good flow. Vey looks up from his bloody hand, looks at the crowd. At you, he's smiling. He's been stabbed through the shoulder during a training exercise. He's losing blood. He needs medical attention. And he's smiling because his cardiovascular system is performing admirably, because his blood is flowing at speeds that would easily pass inspection, because for this moment, however fleeting, he has proof of physiological adequacy. I'm good, he says, voice shaky but determined. See, I'm bleeding fine. It's fast, right? It's definitely fast enough. Nobody answers. The question is too raw, too desperate, too honest about the nightmare you're all living in. A medici orderly arrives, not a full doctor, just a trained enlisted who carries supply pouches. She examines Vey's shoulder with professional efficiency. Through the muscle, missed the bone, you're lucky. Could have been worse. She cleans the wound, applies synthetic skin, wraps his shoulder in proper medical gauze, not the thin stuff from bleeding assessments but real bandages designed for actual injuries. Vey watches her work, still smiling. It was bleeding fast though, right? You saw it. Good circulation. The orderly doesn't answer. Finishes her work. Marks something on her data slate. Report to Medici deck for follow-up in 24 hours. If you develop fever or excessive swelling, report immediately. Try not to get stabbed again. She leaves. The drill resumes. Vey seeks you out during the break. Sits beside you on an equipment crate, cradling his bandaged shoulder. Thanks, he says. You look at him. I stabbed you. Yeah, but did you see? It bled so much. So fast. I mean, I know it's different from the assessment cut, but it means my circulation is good, right? It means I'm probably going to pass tomorrow. You don't know how to respond to this. You've just injured a fellow guardsman and he's thanking you because at least now he has some reassurance about his bleeding rate. The logic is insane. The logic is perfectly sensible given the circumstances. These contradictions exist simultaneously. The wound location is different, you say eventually. Shoulder bleeds differently than forearm. Different blood vessels, different pressure, different. But it was fast, Vey insists. His eyes are desperate, pleading. It was fast, you saw it. Yes, you lie, it was fast. Relief floods his features. Good, that's good. He sits there beside you, smiling, cradling a wound that will ache for weeks, satisfied that at least he has some evidence, however meaningless, that his body might meet Imperial standards tomorrow morning. You think this is what the doctrine does. It turns injury into relief. wounds into victories. It makes us grateful for violence because at least violence doesn't come with a chronometer. That night you can't sleep. It's not unusual. Most guardsmen on this ship suffer from insomnia. The hab deck is too crowded, too noisy, too saturated with the collective anxiety of 300 souls breathing the same air. But tonight is worse than usual. You lie on your bunk, third tier, middle section, position 247, staring at the press tin ceiling 6 inches above your face, and your mind won't quiet. You're thinking about the vials in your footlocker. 3 doses, 30 thrown gelt, potentially 3 more days of passing inspections. Or potentially 3 days closer to cardiac arrest. You're thinking about Helm, 18.3 seconds, not dramatically slower, not obviously deficient, just 3 seconds outside regulation, 3 seconds that separated life from death. You're thinking about Vey, smiling with blood running down his arm, grateful to be stabbed because at least stabbing doesn't come with execution. You're thinking about Corporal Marsk, 7 years in service, 3 near failures, and whatever secret technique she uses to ensure her blood flows fast enough. You're thinking. You awake, Kask. The voice comes from your right. You turn your head. In the bunk beside yours, visible through the narrow gap between bunks, you can see Marsk. She's lying on her side facing you. Her eyes are open in the darkness. Yeah, you whisper back. No point pretending. Sleep is a fiction tonight. Silence. Just breathing and the ambient sounds of the ship ventilation systems, distant engine hum, the creaks and groans of metal under void pressure. Then Marsk, 7 years, 17 campaigns. I've fought orcs on Armageddon, Tyranids on Octavia, chaos cultists in the Atrud reaches. I've been shot, stabbed, burned, and blown up. I've killed more enemies than I can count. I've earned medals and commendations and the respect of officers who have been in the guard longer than I've been alive. Another pause. When she speaks again, her voice is smaller, quieter, and the closest I've ever come to dying. It was in a corridor on the ship, 3 times. 3 fucking times I've stood in formation and bled 0.2 seconds too slowly, 0.6 seconds too slowly, 0.9 seconds too slowly. 3 times I've watched Varrus raise that bolt pistol and known that I was about to die. Not for cowardice, not for failure in combat. For bleeding wrong. You don't know what to say to this. What is there to say? How, you ask finally, how did you pass? What's your? You want to know my secret. There's bitterness in her voice, dark humor. Every morning, an hour before inspection, I take a sharpened stylus and I pierce my fingertips. All 10 fingers, multiple times. I get the blood flowing early. I warm up my cardiovascular system like you'd warm up before a run. I make sure my heart rate is elevated, my blood pressure is high, everything is primed and ready. She shifts position. You hear the creak of her bunk. By the time inspection comes, my hands are throbbing. My fingertips are covered in tiny pinprick scars. You can see them if you look close, but nobody looks close. And when that servo blade cuts my forearm, my body is already in bleeding mode. My blood flows fast because I've trained it to. Because I've hurt myself preemptively to avoid being murdered for insufficient suffering. Jesus Emperor, the practicality of it is as horrifying as it is clever. Does it always work? You ask. So far. She laughs quietly, mirthlessly. Of course, I'm also slowly shredding the nerve endings in my fingertips. In a few more months, I probably won't have sensation in my hands anymore. But I'll be alive, or at least I won't be dead from bleeding too slowly. Combat will probably kill me before the nerve damage becomes problematic. She's quiet for a moment, then. Your body is no longer yours, Kask. It belongs to the Emperor. We say that in the litanies and we think it's metaphorical, this noble sacrifice of self to higher purpose. But here, on this ship, it's literal. Your body belongs to the Imperium. It's assessed, measured, evaluated, and found wanting or sufficient based on metrics you can't control. Another pause. But your blood belongs to Varrus. He's claimed ownership of it, every drop. And he'll take it one way or another, either in measured assessments that determine your worthiness or in explosive executions that spray it across the deck. Those are your options. You want to argue, want to find some flaw in her logic, some reason for hope. You can't, because she's right. Do you pray, Kask? She asks suddenly. Sometimes, you admit. The litanies, the catechisms, same as everyone. I used to pray for courage, Marsk says. When I was young, first enlisted, I'd pray to the Emperor for strength in battle, for courage to face the enemy, for wisdom to serve him well. Her voice drops to barely a whisper. Now I pray for my heart to beat faster. The words hang in the darkness between you. Raw, honest, devastating. That's what we're reduced to, she continues. We don't pray for victory, we don't pray for survival against the enemy. We pray for our cardiovascular systems to perform at regulation speed. We pray that our biology doesn't betray us. We pray for seconds, Kask. Literal seconds. We pray that when the blade cuts, we bleed fast enough. You realize you're gripping your bunk frame, hands tight enough to make your knuckles ache. What do? You ask. The question of a child. The question of someone desperate for answers from someone with more experience. Marsk is silent for a long time. So long you think she's not going to answer. Then, we survive. However we can. We hurt ourselves preemptively. We take illegal stimulants. We pray to an emperor who probably can't hear us and definitely doesn't care about something as insignificant as individual guardsmen bleeding at regulation speed. We survive today, and tomorrow, and the day after until eventually we don't. That's it, that's the only answer. That's service in the Imperial Guard, Kask. That's what it means to serve the Imperium. You survive until you don't. And if you're very, very lucky, you die in combat against actual enemies, instead of executed by your own command for crimes committed by your biology. She rolls over, turns away, conversation over. You lie there in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the vials in your footlocker, thinking about Marsk's scarred fingertips, thinking about Vay's grateful smile with blood running down his arm, thinking about Helm's empty seat in the mess hall, thinking this is only day one. The first day after you really understood what you're living through. The first day of truly comprehending the nightmare. Tomorrow brings another inspection, another blade, another chronometer counting seconds that determine life and death, and you'll stand in formation. You'll extend your arm. You'll pray that your blood flows at regulation speed, because what else can you do? What else is there except survival measured in seconds, life purchased one day at a time with pharmaceutical intervention and preemptive self-harm and desperate prayer? This is the Imperium. This is service. This is what it means to be human in a galaxy that has weaponized even your own biology against you. Sleep, when it finally comes, is troubled. You dream of chronometers, of blood that flows too slowly, of Helm's face in the moment before the bolt round ended him. You wake gasping in the darkness, heart racing, and your first thought, your very first conscious thought is my heart beating fast enough? And you know with cold certainty that this is what the doctrine has done to you. It's turned your own body into the enemy. It's made every heartbeat a question, every pulse a potential condemnation. Welcome to the Imperial Guard. The Emperor protects, does he? You need to understand the numbers, not because numbers will save you, they won't. Not because mathematical analysis provides escape from a system designed to grind you down, it doesn't. But because when you're trapped inside a nightmare, the human mind searches desperately for patterns, for logic, for some framework that transforms arbitrary horror into comprehensible system. This is a survival mechanism. Pattern recognition kept your ancestors alive on ancient Terra, allowed them to predict predator behavior, to understand seasonal cycles, to navigate dangerous environments through accumulated knowledge. But what happens when the pattern you recognize is your own systematic extermination? What happens when the mathematics reveal not a path to survival, but merely the calculated precision of your inevitable death? Let's examine the numbers. The 117th Cadian Reborn currently consists of 2,847 active personnel. This is below regulation strength, A full Imperial Guard regiment should number between 3,000 and 5,000 depending on specialization and Militarum classification. You're understaffed. Have been since the regiment was reformed after Cadia's fall. The regiment has been under Commissar Varrus's command for 14 months. In those 14 months, bleeding compliance assessments have been conducted daily, every morning, every guardsman. 2,847 soldiers times 420 days, approximately 14 months, equals 1,195,740 total assessments. Now, Varrus's threshold is 15 seconds. That's the line between acceptable and insufficient, between life and death, between continued service and summary execution. But here's what you learn from whispered conversations in the Habdeck, from statistical analysis compiled by guardsmen who were Militarum clerks before conscription, from data that spreads through the regiment like a virus, because soldiers need to understand the system killing them. The average human bleeding time from a standardized 4mm laceration varies between 11 and 19 seconds depending on dozens of physiological and environmental factors. 11 to 19 seconds. Varrus's threshold is 15. Do you see the problem? Approximately 30% of perfectly healthy humans will naturally bleed slower than 15 seconds under normal conditions. Not because they're weak, not because they're unfit, simply because biological variation means some bodies process circulation and coagulation differently than others. Now add stress. Fear causes vasoconstriction. Blood vessels constrict, reducing peripheral circulation. Every guardsman standing in that inspection line is terrified. Their bodies are physiologically responding to terror by reducing blood flow to extremities. This slows bleeding by an average of 12–18%. Add environmental factors. The troopship's temperature is kept at 14.5 degrees Celsius, cold enough that many guardsmen show symptoms of mild hypothermia. Cold slows blood flow. Reduces bleeding speed by 8–15%. Add malnutrition. Imperial Guard rations provide approximately 2,200 calories per day of minimal nutritional variety. Most guardsmen are chronically deficient in iron, vitamin K, and proteins necessary for optimal blood composition. This affects coagulation chemistry. Slows bleeding by 5–10%. Add dehydration. Water is rationed. Most guardsmen are operating at slight dehydration, not enough to impair combat function but enough to thicken blood, slow circulation. Another 4–8% reduction in bleeding speed. Stack these factors. Compound them. Do the math. A guardsman who would naturally bleed at 14 seconds under optimal conditions, perfectly acceptable, well within human normal range, bleeds at 17 or 18 seconds under the conditions that exist on this ship. 18 seconds. 3 seconds too slow. Insufficient. Heretical biology. Worthy of execution. Do you understand now? The test isn't measuring fitness. It's measuring luck. It's measuring whether your particular biology, on this particular day, under these particular conditions, happens to fall on the acceptable side of an arbitrary threshold. Let's continue the mathematics. 2,847 guardsmen assessed daily. If 30% fail under normal conditions, and conditions on this ship are far from normal, let's be conservative. Let's assume only 8% of assessments result in failure. That's being generous, assuming most guardsmen are taking pharmaceutical intervention, practicing preemptive self-harm, doing everything possible to ensure passing. 8% failure rate times 2,847 guardsmen equals 228 executions per day. But that's not what happens. You've been tracking. You've been counting. The actual daily execution rate is between 6 and 14, averaging approximately 9.3 per day. Why the discrepancy? Because most guardsmen are cheating. Not cheating in any conventional sense. There are no rules to break, no formal prohibition against pharmaceutical intervention. But they're artificially manipulating their biology through stimulants, through preemptive self-harm, through techniques like Corporal Marsk's fingertip-piercing ritual. These interventions work. They reduce the failure rate from a natural 8% to an artificial 0.3%. 0.3% times 2,847 guardsmen equals 8. 5 executions per day. This matches observed reality. The mathematics work. But here's the horror hidden in those numbers. Even with pharmaceutical intervention, even with desperate self-harm protocols, even with guardsmen doing everything possible to ensure passing, 9 people die every day. 9 people whose crime is that their biology, stressed, terrified, malnourished, cold, dehydrated, couldn't be artificially manipulated enough to meet an arbitrary standard. 9 executions, daily, for 14 months. 3 executions day times 420 days equals 3,906 executions. 3,906 guardsmen executed for bleeding insufficiency. The regiment currently numbers 2,847. That means you have to stop and recalculate because the number seems impossible. The current regiment strength is 2,847. In 14 months, 3,906 have been executed. That's 137% of current strength. The regiment has experienced complete turnover. Every guardsman currently serving is either an original member who survived by luck and pharmaceutical intervention, or a replacement who arrived after the bleeding assessments began. But wait, regiments also suffer combat casualties, training accidents, disease, normal attrition even without bleeding assessments. You don't have exact numbers for combat casualties. Those are classified, known only to regimental command, but based on whispered rumors and partially overheard officer conversations, the regiment has been engaged in 3 combat actions in the past 14 months. Estimated casualties: 600-800 guardsmen killed in actual combat. So, starting strength 14 months ago, approximately 3,000 combat casualties, approximately 700 bleeding assessment executions, 3,906 total losses, 4,606 guardsmen. Current strength, 2,847. That means approximately 2,353 replacement guardsmen have been transferred into the regiment over 14 months to maintain current strength. You're not just experiencing high casualties. You're experiencing continuous systematic extermination barely offset by constant replacement transfers. The regiment is a meat grinder, not because of enemy action, though that's certainly deadly, but because of internal policy that executes more soldiers than combat kills. Let's examine this from another angle. Life expectancy. You arrive in the regiment. You begin daily bleeding assessments. What are your odds of survival? If the daily failure rate is 0.3%, that means you have a 99.7% chance of passing each day. Sounds good, right? 99.7% success rate. Those are excellent odds, but you're not assessed once. You're assessed daily, every day, forever until you're transferred out or die in combat or the regiment is disbanded. Probability of survival over time, 0. 997. Number of days. After 30 days, 91. 4% chance of survival after 60 days, 83. 5% chance after 90 days, 76.3% chance after 180 days, 58.3% chance after 365 days, 34.0% chance. After 1 year of daily bleeding assessments, you have a 34% chance of still being alive, not killed in combat, not wounded or invalided out, just purely from bleeding assessments. You have roughly 1/3 chance of surviving a full year. The average survival time before failing a bleeding assessment is 231 days, 7.5 months. That's your life expectancy under this doctrine. That's how long, on average, you have before your body, stressed and terrified and malnourished and cold, betrays you with insufficient circulation. You've been in the regiment for 42 days. Statistically, you have approximately 6 more months to live. Now let's consider the economic mathematics. Because the Imperium, whatever its many flaws, does keep meticulous records of resource expenditure. Every guardsman represents significant investment. Initial recruitment and training costs. Recruitment processing, 50 throne geld. Basic training, 12 weeks. 2,400 throne geld equipment, facilities, instructor time. Regiment-specific training, 800 throne geld. Equipment issue, lasgun armor uniform kit, 1,200 throne geld. Total initial investment per guardsman, 4,450 throne geld. Ongoing maintenance costs per guardsman. Daily rations, 2-3 throne geld. Ammunition allowance, 1 throne geld day averaged. Equipment maintenance and replacement, 0.8 throne geld day. Medical care, 0.6 throne geld day. Transport and logistics, 3.2 throne geld day. Total daily maintenance, 8.0 throne geld day. Cost of execution. Bolt round, 12 throne geld bolt ammunition is expensive, designed for space marines. Overkill for executing human soldiers, but Commissariat prefers the psychological impact. Body disposal furnace fuel, 0.3 throne geld. Administrative processing, death certificate roster updates, 2 throne geld. Total execution cost, 14. 3 throne geld. Cost of replacement. Transfer processing, 50 throne geld. Transport from previous regiment, 300-800 throne geld, varies by distance. Integration and unit familiarization, 150 throne geld. Total replacement cost, 501,000 throne geld, average 750 throne geld. Now let's calculate the economic impact of the bleeding compliance doctrine. Scenario A. Guardsman serves 1 full year, 365 days, and dies in combat. Initial investment, 4,450 throne geld. 365 days of maintenance, 2,920 throne geld. Total cost, 7,370 throne geld. Combat value provided, 365 days of service. Scenario B. Guardsman fails bleeding assessment after 231 days, statistical average. Initial investment, 4,450 throne geld. 231 days of maintenance, 1,848 throne geld. Execution cost, 14. 3 throne geld. Replacement cost, 750 throne geld. Total cost, 7,062, 3 throne geld. Combat value provided, 231 days of service. The guardsman in Scenario B costs nearly as much as the one in Scenario A, but provides 37% less service time. Now scale this across the regiment. 3,906 executions over 420 days. Cost of executions, 3,906 times 14. 3 throne geld equals 55,855. 8 throne geld spent on bolt rounds and body disposal. Cost of replacements, 3,906 times 750 throne geld equals 2,929,500 throne geld spent processing and transporting replacement guardsmen. Lost investment in executed guardsmen. This is harder to calculate precisely, but each executed guardsman represents the initial investment plus whatever maintenance they received before death, minus the combat value they provided. Conservative estimate, average 3,000 throne geld in lost investment per execution. 3,906 times 3,000 equals 11,718,000 throne geld in lost investment. Total economic cost of bleeding compliance doctrine over 14 months, 14,703,355. 8 throne geld, nearly 15 million throne geld, for a single regiment. For comparison, that's enough to fully equip and train 3 new regiments, purchase 47 Lemon Rust battle tanks, fund an entire planetary defense force for 2 years, or most relevantly, Maintain the current regimen at full strength for 16 years without replacement costs. The bleeding compliance doctrine is not just morally grotesque, it's economically catastrophic. It's burning resources at a rate that would make even the famously inefficient Departamento Militarum accountants weep. Every execution represents massive waste, not just the human cost, but pure economic destruction of Imperial resources. And yet it continues, because efficiency is not the point. There's one more set of numbers you need to understand: the personal mathematics, the intimate calculations each guardsman performs in the dark hours before morning inspection. You've been tracking your own bleeding times. Everyone does. You remember each one with perfect clarity because each one is a reprieve from death. Your 14 assessments. Day 1, 13 2 seconds. Day 2, 14, 1 seconds. Day 3, 12, 8 seconds. Day 4, 13 9 seconds. Day 5, 14, 6 seconds. Day 6, 13 1 seconds. Day 7, 14, 8 seconds. Day 8, 13 4 seconds. Day 9, 14, 2 seconds. Day 10, 13 7 seconds. Day 11, 14, 9 seconds. Day 12, 13, 6 seconds. Day 13, 14, 3 seconds. Day 14, 13 4 seconds this morning. Average 1386 seconds trend, gradually increasing. Early assessments averaged 13. 5 seconds, recent ones average 14. 3 seconds closest call, day 11 at 14. 9 seconds, 1/10 of a second from death. You analyze these numbers obsessively. You search for patterns. Is there correlation between your bleeding time and what you ate the previous day? Does sleep quality affect it? Physical activity? Time since last combat drill? You've noticed your times are slowly increasing. 13 5 seconds average in week 1. 14, 3 seconds in week 2. You're trending toward the threshold. Your body, stressed and malnourished and worn down by the constant fear, is gradually slowing down. At current rate of increase, you calculate you'll cross the 15-second threshold in approximately 50 to 70 days. 2 months. That's how long your body has before it fails you, unless you intervene. Which brings us back to the vials in your footlocker. 3 doses of medical-grade circulation stimulant. 3 pharmaceutical delays of the inevitable. You've done the math on the stimulants too. Redline said they work, said they guarantee faster bleeding, but they also cause side effects: tremors, insomnia, heart palpitations, eventual cardiac damage. How long can you use them before the side effects become obvious? Before your hands shake too badly to hold a lasgun steady? Before the palpitations become dangerous arrhythmia? Unknown. No data. You're experimenting on yourself with substances that have never been properly tested for this application. But the alternative is crossing the threshold. 18.3 seconds like Helm, bolt round, furnace, deleted from existence. So you'll take the drugs. Of course you will. Because 2 months of relative certainty, purchased with pharmaceutical intervention, is better than the daily risk of natural failure. This is the mathematics of your survival. This is what it means to be reduced to numbers, to statistics, to probability calculations that determine whether you live or die. You are not a soldier anymore. You are a data point, a percentage, a probability curve trending toward inevitable failure. The regimental medici staff, the actual doctors, not the orderlies who dispense bandages, know all of this. They've compiled the statistics. They understand the mathematics. They've written reports documenting the economic waste, the physiological impossibility of maintaining 100% compliance with an arbitrary threshold that 30% of humans naturally fail. These reports sit in classified files, marked as sensitive information, accessible only to senior command and commissariat leadership. The reports are ignored because this is not about efficiency, not about optimizing combat effectiveness, not about responsible resource management. This is about something darker, something we'll explore in depth in the next section. But for now, understand this. The mathematics prove the doctrine is counterproductive. The economics demonstrate it's catastrophically wasteful. The physiology shows it's biologically impossible to maintain. And yet bleeding compliance assessments continue. Every morning, every guardsman, the blade descends, the chronometer counts, the judgments are rendered. 9 executions per day, averaged over 14 months. 3,906 dead from bleeding insufficiency. 15 million thrown gelt wasted. And for what? What purpose justifies this systematic destruction? What goal requires the execution of soldiers for biological variation they cannot control? You lie in your bunk at night, position 247, third tier middle section, and you run these calculations over and over, searching for logic, for reason, for some explanation that makes sense. You find none, because sense is not the point. The cruelty is not incidental. The mathematical impossibility is not an oversight. The system is working exactly as designed. It's designed to terrify. It's designed to demonstrate absolute power over the most fundamental aspects of your existence. It's designed to prove that even your biology, the autonomous systems you have no conscious control over, can be criminalized, assessed, and found wanting. This is the mathematics of murder. This is the arithmetic of absolute authority. And tomorrow morning, you'll stand in formation again. You'll extend your arm again. You'll watch your blood well from a fresh cut, and you'll pray it flows fast enough. Because no matter how thoroughly you understand the mathematics, no matter how completely you comprehend the system, you still have to play the game. You still have to hope your number doesn't come up. You still have to survive one more day in a system mathematically designed to eventually kill you. The chronometer will tick. The seconds will pass. The judgment will be rendered. 13.4 seconds. Acceptable. But tomorrow, the mathematics say you're living on borrowed time. And no amount of calculation can change what the numbers already know. Eventually, inevitably, you will fail. It's not a question of if, only when. You need to understand what this is really about. Not blood flow, not cardiovascular efficiency, not optimization or combat readiness or any of the official justifications documented in Commissar Gelman's treatise. This is about power, absolute, unquestionable, total power over every aspect of your existence. Let me show you how it works. You wake in the darkness. The chronometer in your mind, you've developed an internal sense of time, calibrated by 46 previous mornings, tells you it's approximately 5:20 hours, 40 minutes before the lights come on, 90 minutes before inspection. The habdeck is filled with the sounds of fitful sleep, snoring, coughing, the occasional muttered word from someone trapped in nightmares. 300 souls breathing recycled air. The temperature is 8 degrees Celsius. You've learned to estimate this by how long it takes your breath to become visible, by the specific way cold settles into your bones. You reach under your bunk. Your footlocker is there. Standard issue metal container, 60 cm times 40 cm times 30 cm, containing everything you're permitted to own in this life. A spare uniform, personal hygiene supplies, a small prayer book someone left behind that you've claimed as your own, though you rarely read it. Letters from home that you stopped answering months ago because what would you say? Dear family, I'm still alive today because my blood flowed at 9 seconds instead of 18 seconds. How are you? And the vials. 3 medical-grade circulation stimulants. You've been conserving them, trying to map the correlation between your natural bleeding time and when intervention becomes necessary. Yesterday's assessment, 7 seconds. That's 0.7 seconds from threshold. That's cutting too close. Today you decide. Today you'll use pharmaceutical assistance. You sit up carefully, bunk frames creak, and you've learned to move silently to avoid disturbing others. But in the darkness, you see other shapes moving too. Guardsmen sitting up, reaching for their own footlockers. You catch the faint sound of vials being opened, liquid being swallowed. You're not alone in this. Maybe half the habdeck is awake, preparing for inspection through whatever methods they've developed. You open the vial. The liquid inside is clear, slightly viscous, faintly medicinal smell. No instructions came with it. Redline's black market doesn't include dosage guidelines. You're guessing based on whispered conversations, extrapolating from fragmentary advice. You drink half the vial, save the other half for next time. The taste is bitter, chemical. You chase it with water from your canteen, lukewarm, slightly metallic, rationed but sufficient. Then you wait. The effects begin within minutes. You feel your heart rate increase, not dramatically, not dangerously, but noticeably. Your pulse becomes more prominent. You can feel it in your neck, your wrists, your temples. A slight warmth spreads through your chest. Your hands begin to tremble, just slightly, barely perceptible. But enough that when you extend your fingers, you see the minutes shaking. Is this normal? Is this dangerous? You have no idea, no medical oversight, no professional guidance. You're self-medicating with stolen pharmaceuticals based on desperate necessity and incomplete information. This is what the Imperium has reduced you to. The lights come on at 600, harsh and sudden as always. Around you, guardsmen begin their morning routine. You notice many of them display the same symptoms you do: slightly elevated respiration, finger tremors, the glassy-eyed alertness of pharmaceutical stimulation. Nobody comments on it. This is the new normal. Formation is called. You assemble in the corridor. Commissar Varrus arrives with his data slate and chronometer, servitors trailing behind with their case of instruments. The inspection proceeds. The blade descends. Blood wells, judgments are rendered. When it's your turn, you extend your arm with hands that shake slightly from the stimulant. The servitor makes the cut, clean, precise. You feel the sharp bite of pain, then the warm flow of blood, but it's different today. You can see it. The blood doesn't just well, it pours. Faster than previous days. Noticeably faster. The stimulant is working. Your heart is pumping harder, your blood pressure is elevated, your circulation is enhanced by pharmaceutical intervention. Varrus raises his chronometer. 10.2 seconds. Acceptable. 10.2, that's 3. 5 seconds faster than yesterday's natural rate. The stimulant has purchased you substantial margin. You could fail by 3 full seconds and still pass. Relief floods through you. This is safety. This is survival. This is what the drugs offer, a buffer zone between your natural biology and arbitrary death. You apply your gauze with trembling hands and return to position. Around you, similar scenarios play out. Most guardsmen pass easily today, times averaging between 10 and 13 seconds. Faster than previous days. Evidence that pharmaceutical intervention has become standard practice across the unit. But not everyone is using drugs. 5 positions down your rank, a guardsman you vaguely recognize. Older, maybe 45, receding gray hair, tired eyes, extends his arm. You see no tremor in his hands, no signs of stimulant use. The blade descends, blood wells, slowly. You can see Varrus counting. The seconds stretch. The chronometer ticks. 17.1 seconds. The bolt pistol is drawn. The guardsman doesn't plead, doesn't protest. He just closes his eyes and exhales a long, slow breath of resignation. The bolt round ends him. The servitors drag the body away. You wonder, did he refuse to use stimulants on principle, religious objection, ethical stance? Or did he simply lack the throne gelt to purchase them? Was he executed for poverty as much as for slow bleeding? You'll never know. His name will be deleted from the roster by evening. But here's what you're beginning to understand. The system wants you to use the stimulants. Not officially. There's no formal policy encouraging pharmaceutical intervention. But effectively, the 15-second threshold is calibrated to require artificial enhancement for consistent passing. Think about it. If natural human bleeding time ranges from 11-19 seconds, and environmental factors, stress, cold, malnutrition, dehydration, push most guardsmen to the 15-18 second range, then maintaining 100% compliance requires artificial intervention. The system is designed to force you into the black market, force you to self-medicate, force you to damage your body through pharmaceutical means to satisfy an arbitrary standard. This is not accidental. This is not oversight. This is engineered dependency. By making the threshold impossibly strict under existing conditions, the system forces you to seek solutions. and the only solutions available are dangerous, unregulated, long-term harmful. But you take them anyway, because the alternative is immediate death. And here is where the true power dynamic reveals itself. You are now complicit in your own destruction. You're not being forced to take stimulants at gunpoint. You're choosing to, voluntarily, desperately, because the system has created conditions where this choice is the only rational option. But it's still a choice, which means when your heart eventually fails from prolonged stimulant abuse, when you develop cardiac arrhythmia or liver damage or any of the dozen long-term effects of using circulation drugs beyond safe dosage. That's on you, that's your choice. Your failure to maintain your body properly. The system has made you responsible for the harm it forces you to inflict upon yourself. This is genius in a horrifying way. It's psychological dominance refined to art. The Imperium doesn't just control your actions. It controls the circumstances until your actions become self-destructive, then holds you accountable for the destruction. Something changes. Morning inspection begins as usual. Formation. Commissar Varrus. The data slate and chronometer, the servitors with their blades. But today, after the bleeding compliance assessment, Varrus doesn't dismiss the formation. Additional inspection protocols, he announces in his quiet, terrible voice. Authorized by Commissariat High Command. Effective immediately. The servitors open their case and remove new instruments, medical scanners, diagnostic devices, chemical analysis tools. Extended your left arms, Varrus orders. Maintain position. You comply, everyone complies. Around you, 300 guardsmen hold their arms extended, fresh cuts still bleeding through gauze. The servitors move down the ranks with handheld scanners. As one approaches you, you see the device, a medical auspex smaller than the ones Medici officers use but clearly sophisticated. Military-grade diagnostic equipment. The servitor waves the scanner over your extended arm. It hums. Lights flicker. Data appears on a small screen. Varrus consults his data slate as the servitor moves away, makes notations. His expression doesn't change. It never changes. He proceeds down the line. Scanner reads are taken from every guardsman. The data is collected, compiled, analyzed. Then Varrus stops at a position in the second rank. Guardsman Kellic, step forward. A man you don't know, 30s, average build, unremarkable in every way, steps out of formation. His face shows confusion, fear. Your bleeding time was 11.6 seconds, Varrus says. Well within acceptable parameters. A pause. This should be relief. This should mean safety. However, chemical analysis of your blood indicates presence of prohibited substances. Specifically, medical-grade circulation stimulant, Class IV controlled pharmaceutical, unauthorized possession and use of Departamento Militarum Medici supplies is a criminal offense under Imperial law. Oh no, oh no, no, no. Sir, Kellic begins, but Varrus continues as if he hasn't spoken. More significantly, artificial manipulation of physiological assessment results constitutes fraud, fraudulent misrepresentation of combat readiness, deception of command authority. The bolt pistol is drawn. Under Commissariat authority, I find you guilty of fraud, theft of Imperial resources, and attempting to deceive assessment protocols. Sentence is summary execution. Sir, please, everyone is. The bolt round interrupts his plea. The body is dragged away. The inspection continues. 3 more guardsmen are identified with chemical traces in their blood. 3 more executions. Same charge, fraudulent manipulation of assessment results. By the time inspection ends, 7 are dead. 3 for bleeding too slowly. 4 for bleeding fast enough but having chemical assistance. The formation is dismissed. Nobody speaks. Nobody dares because the game has changed. You sit in the hab deck afterwards staring at the 2 remaining vials in your footlocker. Yesterday they represented survival, safety, a pharmaceutical buffer against biological failure. Today they represent a different kind of death sentence. Because now the test has expanded. It's not enough to bleed fast. You must bleed fast naturally. Artificially enhanced bleeding is fraudulent, punishable by execution, but bleeding too slowly is also punishable by execution. The window of acceptable biology has narrowed impossibly. You must bleed between 11 and 15 seconds, and you must do so without pharmaceutical assistance, despite environmental conditions, cold, stress, malnutrition that push natural bleeding times above 15 seconds. This is mathematically impossible for a significant percentage of Guardsmen, which means you realize with cold, crystalline clarity, this is intentional. The system has created an impossible standard, then criminalized the adaptations people develop to meet that standard. This is not about blood flow. This is not about combat readiness. This is about demonstrating that you have no escape, no solution, no method of satisfying the demands placed upon you. You can fail by bleeding too slowly. You can fail by bleeding fast enough through artificial means. The only way to pass is to naturally, without assistance, maintain bleeding times in a narrow window that environmental conditions make biologically unlikely. In other words, you can only pass through luck, pure, random, uncontrollable luck. And when luck fails, as it inevitably must, you die. But here's the cruelest part. You probably still have to use the stimulants, because your baseline bleeding time is 7 seconds. That's too close to threshold to risk going natural. You need the pharmaceutical boost to maintain safe margin. But now using the stimulants might get you executed for fraud. So you have to choose. Risk execution for bleeding too slowly, certain, if your natural rate crosses 15 seconds. Or risk execution for pharmaceutical manipulation, possible, if the scanners detect chemicals in your blood. The system has created a scenario where both compliance and non-compliance are potentially fatal, where every choice leads to death, where the only difference is which rule kills you. This is when you understand the true purpose of the bleeding compliance doctrine. It's not about maintaining standards. It's about maintaining fear. Absolute, crushing, inescapable fear that dominates every moment of your existence. Fear that your body will betray you. Fear that your solutions will be criminalized. Fear that no matter what you do, natural or enhanced, careful or desperate, you might die tomorrow morning in a corridor for reasons you cannot control. This fear serves a purpose. Terrified soldiers don't question orders, don't form resistance movements, don't organize or rebel or even think critically about their circumstances. Terrified soldiers focus entirely on immediate survival, on passing the next assessment, on living one more day. Terror makes you controllable. Terror makes you compliant. Terror reduces human beings to purely reactive creatures operating on animal survival instinct rather than rational thought. And the Commissariat, the institution tasked with maintaining discipline and loyalty across the Imperial Guard, has refined terror into science. They've found the perfect pressure point, your own biology, the autonomous systems you cannot consciously control, the heartbeat and circulation that happen without volition. They've criminalized biological variation. Then they've criminalized adaptation to that criminalization. They've created a nested series of impossible standards that ensure constant possibility of execution. Not certain execution. That would be simply murderous. No, this is more sophisticated. This is probabilistic execution. You might survive, probably will survive today, maybe tomorrow too, but eventually, statistically, inevitably, your luck runs out. And the genius, the horrible, undeniable genius, is that this keeps you hoping. If death were certain, you might find courage in despair, might rebel, might go down fighting. But death is only probable. You might survive, probably will survive today. So you comply, you follow orders, you stand in formation and extend your arm and pray and hope and bargain with whatever powers might influence the rate at which blood flows from a 4mm laceration. You remain controllable because you remain hopeful. And hope, in this context, is the mechanism of your oppression. That night, you lie in your bunk and you realize something that makes you want to vomit. You admire it. Some part of you, the part that studied tactics, that appreciates efficiency, that understands systems, admires the elegant horror of what's been done to you. This is control refined to perfection. This is domination so complete it operates on autonomic biological processes. This is power so absolute it makes you complicit in your own destruction while maintaining just enough hope that you don't abandon compliance. The Commissariat has achieved something remarkable. They've created a system of control that requires no physical restraints, no constant surveillance, no elaborate enforcement apparatus. Just a blade, a chronometer, and the knowledge that every morning might be your last. 300 guardsmen controlled completely by threat that is simultaneously always present and never certain. Schrödinger's execution. You are simultaneously alive and dead until the moment of assessment collapses the waveform into one or the other. And this uncertainty, this quantum state of threatened existence, keeps you perfectly, absolutely obedient. You hate that you understand this. You hate that some analytical part of your mind appreciates the terrible elegance. You hate that you're lying here in the dark, analyzing the system of your oppression like it's an academic exercise rather than the nightmare you're living through. But understanding is survival. Pattern recognition is human. You're trying to map the system because if you can understand it, maybe you can navigate it, except the system is designed to be unnavigable. The only way to win is not to play, and the only way not to play is to die. So you play. Everyone plays. And the Commissariat watches with data slates and chronometers, recording who lives and who dies, compiling statistics on compliance and control. You are not a soldier. You are an experiment in psychological dominance. And every morning you prove the experiment's success by standing in formation, extending your arm and submitting to assessment. Because what else can you do? Rebellion means execution. Refusal means execution. Escape means execution, assuming you could even escape a troopship in the void. The only choice is compliance, and compliance means participating in a system designed to eventually kill you. This is the anatomy of control. This is what absolute power looks like. Not the crude power of physical force, but the refined power of making you police yourself, harm yourself, fear yourself. The power to make your own body the instrument of your oppression. Welcome to the Imperium. The Emperor protects, does he? Or does he simply watch while his servants refine cruelty into doctrine and call it efficiency? You don't have answers. You have only fear. And tomorrow morning you'll wake in the dark again and the cycle will continue, because that's what the system demands. And you have no choice but to comply.